Hi folks, I'm Steve Kapp. I'm one of the From Day One founders. Thank you for watching that video. I noticed you were paying even more attention than on a plane this time. You're a captive audience. One additional note, your seats are, I hope they're comfortable, but they definitely do not recline, so don't even try. We're excited and honored this morning because we couldn't have a better way to kick off this day's conference than to have three people who represent partnerships that are based in Georgia, but have an impact far, far beyond. Habitat for Humanity creates these partnerships to build homes and hope alongside families around the world. For everyone involved, the benefits are more than just housing. We have with us today, they were already introduced, but just to go down the line, Tim Mapes, who's Chief Marketing Officer for Delta Airlines. We have Jonathan Reckford, Habitat for Humanity CEO and author of Our Better Angels, 7 Simple Virtues That Will Change Your Life and the World. And we have copies out in the lobby area, and you can either take one or sign up for one, and we'll mail it to you. And last but not least, Christian Leard, who is president of Levolor, the maker of window blinds and shades, designed to work beautifully every day. I thought very nice. Thank you for being here. I thought we'd start with Jonathan. Habitat for Humanity's roots go back to 1976. I don't know that everybody realizes that, but the mission seems even more crucial now, given the crisis in home affordability, economic inequality, natural disasters. What's your view of the rising need out there?
Thank you, Steve. Good morning. It's great to be with you all today. There is an urgency now because we have a visible housing crisis in the United States and around the world. We've actually had a housing crisis, an affordability crisis for a long time, but I think it's become more visible now and more urgent. And the structural problem is that since the Great Recession of 08-09, we've seen an incredible acceleration of land prices, materials prices, and labor costs that have all risen far faster than incomes. So you've had housing prices do this while incomes have done this. And so even markets, we hear mostly about the New Yorks and San Franciscos, which are extreme, but the reality is even the Atlantas and the Houstons that were historically affordable have become unaffordable for low and even moderate income families. And I think sometimes it's now because middle class families, children can't afford housing that everyone's talking about it. But the reality is we've had large segments of the community that had been struggling already. The typical global benchmark is that no family should pay more than about 30% of their income on housing, which leaves enough room or enough margin to be able to have food, health care, all the other basic needs of life, transportation. And what we have now is 1 out of 6 U.S. families are paying over half their income on housing. Which forces just heartbreaking choices. And about 38 million families are paying over that 30% benchmark, meaning their cost burden. And so that's the crux of the problem. On top of the pure cost, there's also the element of NIMBY. So where housing is also a critical piece. We know, and the data is overwhelmingly clear, that the best model for equality and equity in a community, but also the practically best model is mixed income, mixed use. Housing where people can live close to where they work. We've created a situation where people have gone further and further out and away from cities to chase affordability, but that's actually terrible for their families. It's expensive if you think of housing as your mortgage or rent plus utilities plus the cost to get to work, but also then means clogged roads and environmental challenges for everyone in that process. So one of the barriers to that is NIMBY. Everybody knows not in my backyard. I just came back from California. In California, it's worse. It's banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. And so as a result of that, there are 3 million units short of housing. And so we really have a core supply problem, and we need to build a lot more housing for low and moderate income families, because at every level of income, we all want housing that's affordable for us.
Thank you. I have a follow-up for you, Jonathan, and then I will talk with your colleagues here. Habitat's work has really expanded in depth and breadth. How much have you increased the scale and nature of your partnerships with colleagues like these gentlemen?
You know, our view, we've happily been able to grow really fast. In 2005, we were helping about 125,000 people annually, which was great. That was a record. But last year, we helped 7 million. And that is only possible through partnerships. And in some ways, our model turned inside out, that rather than thinking we could ever build our way out, that we wanted to be a partner and catalyst for worldwide access to safe, decent, affordable housing. And so really our partnerships with all sectors are critical, but probably for Habitat specifically, our partnerships with the private sector have been one of the most important enabling aspects of that. And we found that often the sort of front door has been employee engagement and coming in through that lens. But more and more, we've really been building, and that's why we thought it's so appropriate to have two of our partners here with us, that really strategic partnerships ought to not only help the cause that the company is supporting, but should be advancing the strategic goals of the company as well.
Tim, Delta's longstanding relationship with Habitat has resulted in, I think, $14 million in donations and contributions over the last 2.5 decades. How has that relationship evolved?
Well, first of all, I'd thank everybody for your time and attention during the video. Those of you here in Atlanta could probably read the script without Lisa, the flight attendant, saying that. We're grateful for that. We're also enormously proud of our association with Habitat, and it's a privilege to be here with you this morning. Our orientation, like many perhaps in this room, is driven based on our own employees. There's 90,000 people at Delta who have the privilege every year of serving, last year, 204 million people. And as you might imagine, as we call it branding from the inside out, cultural development requires that we pay very close attention to what it is those employees want. And as you noticed, I don't know if you happened to see one of the shirts that one of our team members was wearing in the video, but she said, "This is my house," while she was building that house. And that's very much how the people of Delta feel, whether it's Habitat or American Cancer Society or breast cancer research or any host of a number of things. But what we've seen grow is, because of the dynamics that Jonathan mentioned, there's just an orientation around the need for more of these. We'll build 15 homes this year, 8 outside the United States, 7 in the U.S. We've built 273 homes over our time. And the reason the numbers keep growing is because our employees want to do more. And one thing you might find fascinating, among the things we do in addition to trying to open this up, and we do a bid so that literally all 90,000 employees could bid to be on one of the builds. But our customers are quite interested in doing that, as well as are our partners. So when we build in Brazil, we have a partner airline in Brazil, or in Mexico with Aeromexico, or Korea with Korean Airlines. And I think this year it'll be with WestJet in Vancouver. But our own customers bid SkyMiles to accompany our employees. And the typical bid, and everybody here can relate to what it costs to get a $25,000 typical domestic ticket. The average winner of those bids is 600,000 SkyMiles donated to accompany Delta employees to go build. So it gives you an indication that this isn't just a pet project. I think all of us, particularly here in Atlanta, I live in Morningside. I drive by one gentleman named Paul who's homeless in Virginia Highlands, and 2 more at the intersection of Boulevard and Freedom Parkway, one of whom's name is Akeem, who lives under a bridge. When you see that in Atlanta with the opulence and the prosperity that this city has, juxtaposed against, I think, the heritage and the history that we have all the way back to the Candler family, and certainly we were talking Home Depot and Arthur Blank and Bernie Marcus, who of course has been instrumental with where we sit today. I think it's just a requirement that we get involved and we do something to help, and we're enormously proud to be able to play a role in that.
How do you then show your pride and get the word out, not just to your employees, but the public and your flying passengers, in a way that's organic, that doesn't seem like grandstanding, like, look how, you know.
Yeah, if I was honest and candid, I would say we do a poor job of that. We're very good at the doing. We're less good at the, Charlie Brown said one of the poorest things about being humble is you can't brag about it to anybody. I think that's where we kind of sit. 1% of Delta's net income goes back to the communities we serve and the charities that we support. That fact is not known. Among the things we do all over the place, here in Atlanta and elsewhere, many instances aren't known. And that's really the point of that video. But the point of that video is not for Delta to get credit. It's to inspire others to take action, to act on the causes that move them and that they relate to.
Mm-hmm. Christian, Levolor is a new partner which made recently, I think, $1 million commitment to donate blinds and shades to these houses that need the window treatments. Why is that partnership attractive to you? And what compelled it, what also, and finally, what benefit we have a lot of human resources people here, what are the benefits that accrue to your employees?
Sure. No, that's a great question. And we talked a little bit about this, that our company was looking for a philanthropic endeavor, and it more started as an observation that we weren't really active in the community. So it started small, and it actually started with things that were important to me, and I found to be important to some of my staff, is that was what we were going to support. And kind of the next level was, how are we going to touch the community on a consistent basis? But really, we were looking for a broader connection that connected really our product and our purpose with the right level of philanthropy, and that's where Habitat came in, because we're kind of the window of the home, right? So we're what brings light into the home and kind of the finishing project of something. And Habitat is something I've actually been involved with for over 20 years, and was dying to have this opportunity to bring that connection to our company. So that it's the most logical connection, honestly, in our industry, in the building products industry, and it's something that I'm incredibly proud to be able to bring to our organization, and that our organization in turn is very proud to be a part of, both from a build standpoint, and then the fact that we're putting blinds and shades in the vast majority of these houses across the United States. So for us, it's that final touch point that makes a house a home, and something that our employees can really get their arms around, and how it connects with our purpose.
So they're involved in some of the installation and building.
Yeah, yep. So it's not just the product. It's we had a large group of folks at the Carter Work Project in Nashville this past year, and we do other builds. So we talked about our partners, partner builds throughout the country. So it's that's the part where the employees actually feel involved when they're out there at the house. It's not just the product for us. It's the being together with the community and our partners.
Wow, that's great. Jonathan, you work with many corporate partners. There's large-scale partners like Delta, but you also have partnerships with the likes of J. Crew and the Blue Jeans Go Green initiative, in which the denim is recycled into housing insulation, which is a creative use. For the people here who are considering a social impact program, how should they think about picking a partner? What's organic to what they do and natural, and what advice would you give them? And also about the degree of involvement of employees, whether it's unskilled work, cutting 2x4s, or actually something more skill oriented.
Thank you. And I think there is an overwhelmingly clear best practice for all of you, and scientifically documented. The data is overwhelming. You should all partner with Habitat for Humanity. So it's simple, clean. It is. But it's possible. There are actually other good causes out there as well. And we were talking beforehand that there's been an evolution, I would say, in a thoughtful way, from what I would call CSR 1.0, which was sort of senior leadership's pet charities and whatever they liked, to 2.0, which was really being more strategic about what's a fit for the values of the company, but also for the business of the company, in terms of then how do we tie that together in a way that makes sense both for the employees and customers. And the data is overwhelming now. Best talent want to work for companies that are values-driven and live that out in a tangible way in the communities that they serve, but also customers, price value being equal, want to do the same. And so what we found really powerful is to sit down with the leadership of the company, share strategies on both sides, and then customize a solution that actually drives ideally the business results. Now that may be through better employee engagement, maybe through better customer engagement, maybe in other ways, and then find ways to be able to tell that story in an authentic way. And actually, I love that many companies don't want to brag, but I think increasingly they're finding they're actually being expected to tell that story as ESG expectations are rising globally in terms of the way companies engage. And so I'll give just a nice example. It's sort of like Miracle on 34th Street. We work with both Lowe's and Home Depot, all right, who are diametrically opposed, but they both partner with Habitat. Now, it's very logical. Home, could not be a better fit. That's logical. we're one of the largest customers of both organizations, so it's actually interestingly strategic from the other side. But we then found specific ways. So Home Depot's focused on veterans, that's their particular niche, so we focus particularly on underhoused veterans and have specialty projects. With Lowe's, we developed a program called Women Build that's all about empowering women and focused on their customers, and that's worked. And sometimes it can be surprising as well. We have one of our largest partnerships is with an insurance company, and they use Net Promoter Score. Some of your organizations may use Net Promoter Score. Even though they're US focused only, we created a small international component because so much of our work is outside the US. And they actually discovered that the biggest driver of Net Promoter of anything they did in the organization for their customers was having sales managers take a group of customers on an international build with Habitat. And so now we're going to run 150 international build trips just customized for this partner. And they found it to be an incredibly powerful business driver. Now for us, that's getting funding to very high need countries around the world. And all those customers are getting this very powerful, deep transformational experience of our brand. So it's a really nice win on both sides. We are blessed. Habitat's brand is kind of off the charts right now in the US. It was valued last year by Interbrand at $15.6 billion. So we'd be well ahead of Starbucks if we were a private company. And so there's a goodwill associated with the partnering. But I think the deeper part is engagement. My first, like so many people like Christian, I think almost 30 years ago I was working for Disney. And Disney would spend a fortune on what I would call artificial team building. So they would sort of contrive to find ways to kind of build team. And then one day we sponsored a couple of houses in Orlando, Florida, and I took my team out. And spending the day alongside a family working on the side of their house, first of all, the senior leaders are rarely the most skilled construction workers. It kind of shakes up the hierarchy and forces people to do things they're not used to doing together, but with real purpose. And then a few of us kept coming back and volunteering because it was such a powerful experience. And so I think the key, regardless of the cause, is how does it anchor in the mission of the company? How do you tie it together in a way that engages both, I think, your employees and ideally your customers, and then do it in a way that does feel authentic in terms of telling that story, and don't pigeonhole it in one area. So it shouldn't only be in HR. It's really got to be owned by the senior leadership if it's going to be embedded in the culture.
Thanks. Tim, Habitat and Delta have focused on building a better world, of course. And I wondered about your recent sustainability commitment from Delta and what that means for the planet and the community.
Yeah, so we have a belief and a mantra, if you will, that at Delta, no one better connects the world. And the concept around that is naturally that an airline flies people between point A and B, but more importantly, at a human level, brings people together, whether it's for weddings or funerals or any of the myriad things that lead people to need to come together in what ultimately that we're all experiencing right now is an increasingly divisive, nationalistic world. And so there's a great thing in aviation that the thing you push against is actually the thing that lifts you up. And the thing we're pushing against is this belief that somehow we are collectively better as humanity being separate and apart and really disregarding the value of diversity and inclusion and all of the many forms that it takes. And the commitment that we made last week or on the 14th, which is $1 billion over the next 10 years to really address climate change and to orient the airline to become more and the most sustainable is a direct relationship to that, because as this airline that believes no one better connects the world, you have to respect the world, you have to reflect the world, you have to protect the world. And I would just say that clarity for all of us in this room and others that are in roles like ours, the clarity of your purpose, the clarity of your organizational values does directly drive, just as whether it's the Home Depot or Lowe's example, or the deeper cut into women in terms of construction or veterans in the case of Home Depot. I think that, Coke, refreshment, but naturally they're concerned about water quality and recycling and things like that. Every one of our organizations, if you just look at the core values, has that degree of clarity. And the importance of having that clarity is it allows you to be, I think, quicker in making decisions and more bold and active on the execution of those decisions. Because if you're unclear, obviously it's much more difficult to make decisions in a timely manner. And for us as an airline where our planes are going 525 miles an hour, speed matters, right? And the ability to move with speed. And the most maybe poignant example that many in this room may recall about that was immediately after the Parkland school shootings, Delta took a position that was not popular even in our state with many with regard to guns. But Ed Bastian, our CEO, I think at that time said, our values aren't for sale. And the reason he said that is we lost some tax benefits here in the state of Georgia that were up to about $38 or $40 million. And the economics of that were immaterial to us. The clarity with regard to the organizational commitment to addressing our values and to proving to ourselves, perhaps most importantly, but to anybody else who cared, that we were clear as to who we are. And we're equally clear in terms of the commitment to the environment. If you looked at the World Economic Forum and Davos this year, 9 of the top 10 threats to humanity are related to climate change. That was not true 20 years ago. None of the top 10 threats to humanity had anything to do with environmental sustainability. It has nothing to do with the politicalization of this as an issue. It has everything to do with us as humans. We get one planet. In fact, we're going to have a new TV spot that everybody in this room will see in the first week in March that focus on the fact that the one thing that unites us all is we're in many ways on the biggest flight of all, which is all of us are on one thing called Earth moving through space. And can we focus and orient ourselves around the importance of that, what it is around humanity, whether it's diversity and inclusion, environmental sustainability, any of these other causes, that we can literally live up to what it means to truly connect the world.
It sounds like the term sustainability, which colloquially we think of as about the environment and so on, is really being embraced in a much broader way, like sustaining the community, sustaining the globe, sustaining civilization, and so on.
It is for us, but to be clear, we emit carbon. And increasingly young people, I would hope everyone in this room is equally concerned, but increasingly young people are of the belief that with Greta and other people like Greta, that you've got to make a decision between travel and protecting the planet. That is not a decision we want any customer, anywhere, anytime to be forced to make. We need to solve this problem for customers such that the people who want to travel and see the world and experience other cultures and become sensitive and empathetic toward others can do that without in any way harming our planet. And that's a responsibility we have, not that our customers have, that we have. So we have to solve this problem. That was really the genesis behind this. And so single-use plastics and aluminum recycling, all good, but make no mistake about it, for us it's carbon and it's emissions and it's our ability to negate those. We're only 2%, aviation is 2% of the world's carbon emissions, but when you fly and burn jet fuel, obviously we have to take that very seriously and we have to find new ways of being able to meet customer demand, but not do so at the expense of the planet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Christian, you've worked for other brands before in manufacturing, good old manufacturing, including Charbroil and Rubbermaid. And I was wondering if you could take the long view about how companies have kind of evolved their thinking in terms of their commitment to social impact and deciding what causes to support.
I think it starts to piggyback a bit on what all of us have said, which is connecting your values and your purpose with who you decide to partner with. And I do think that's becoming more important. We talked a bit about the youthfulness of our employees these days and how that's almost a mandate. We have that in in interviews with our potential employees, that's one of the first questions that they ask, and it's not a scripted one, and they want details behind how are we giving, how are we connecting, what are we doing from a philanthropic standpoint, and it's not, well, we donate X. I mean, they truly want specificity around what we're going to do and why we think it's important. And also the long commitment, right? We talked about the evolution of giving, and it's not a 1 year, and it's an actual in your P&L, in your mission statement, in the plans. Mm-hmm. So I think that has evolved. My current boss, he did talk about, his philosophy is we do good things because we want to do good things. We don't talk about it. And what my organization, what we're looking at is how do we in an authentic way talk about our partnership? How do we you take credit for it, for lack of a better word, because it is meaningful to our customers. We talk about Home Depot and Lowe's, our two largest customers, and it's important to the consumer. So, the entire ecosystem between employee, customer, end user, it's important to have that feeling and make it important to us. So it has absolutely evolved. I think that the previous ownership of our company and different publicly traded companies, your spirit of philanthropy kind of ebbs and flows with the total profitability of your company, unfortunately. But having a dedication to it and having it be one of your core tenets helps you maintain that position, which is what we're striving to do. But again, at an employee level, at a customer level, and a consumer level, it's expected. And now it's just for us, we don't have the opportunity to show videos like this very often, the 3-minute safety video, but what's the embodiment of that for Levolor? And that's kind of what my next turn is on what are we going to do to really talk about the partnership with our customers.
I'd like to ask, you mentioned young people. Generationally, Jonathan, what are you seeing in terms of Gen Z, millennials, in terms of both at companies and the ones you work with, in terms of putting values more on a higher plane? Are you seeing that?
I'm actually incredibly optimistic. I think it's the nature of every generation to be concerned about that next generation, and those of us who are boomers, I hear a lot of mixed things about millennials, but this is the most globally connected and compassionate generation I think we've ever had in terms of care. And I do think they're also setting a much higher bar maybe than any generation on expecting that wherever they work will be authentically committed to making their communities better. And so I think there's going to be upward pressure from the best talent to push. And I think in the same way, maybe not perfectly consistently, but more committed to using the way that they shop or the way that they consume in ways also that reinforce their values. And so I think from both lenses, there'll be growing pressure over time. Today, they don't have the big dollars, but obviously they are going to be that's the future for all of us. So figuring out how we engage them now for when they become the main anchors of the economy.
Tim, you have hundreds of thousands of employees and probably hiring younger people all the time. Are you seeing similar patterns?
100%. Jonathan used the word engagement. I think that's right. It's less increasingly in terms of our ability to acquire and attract the right types of talent about checks we write or money we give. It's literally, how do I get involved? And do you, even as an organization, have values and actions in the community that reflect my values and the actions that I already undertake? I mean, it's interesting when you have as many employees as we have, that there is every manner of engagement, whether it's through churches or whether it's through social causes or other organizations that are already present and that our employees are already engaging in. And among the things we did last year at Profit Sharing Day was create something called the Great Delta Give Back, which was to formalize the ability for every one of those employees to have a paid day off to donate however they chose to whatever cause they wished to in our community. And all that did, candidly, was formalize what was already happening, because bosses and supervisors would already say, hey, this department's going to go build a Habitat home, or this division or this group of employees. But it reinforced the kind of the values of the company to say, hey, this matters to us in a way that we're going to provide you with freedom to do it. It's one thing to say, yeah, we support Habitat. It's another when bosses say, oh, you're building a Habitat house, of course you can go to Vancouver for a week or whatever the period of time is, and not go with guilt or somehow thinking like I'm doing the right thing, but my company's not behind me here. It's very much that heartfelt emotional resonance of I'm doing something that's an extension of my company's values because that's a reflection of me and what it is I value personally.
I'm going to toss in a question that I didn't mention to you guys backstage, but it's a big theme of our conferences, which is diversity. And it seems like a lot of these activities are both addressing social justice, but they're also probably helping your companies or your organizations come into contact with a wider range of people, whether it's social class or color or gender or all kinds of things. Is that something that you find?
I mean, absolutely. I think it's part of diversity and inclusion is part of everything that we do as well. I mean, both from an HR philosophy and a management philosophy, but absolutely. I mean, this helps us in many ways. We see it a lot.
I would say similarly. I mean, you think about, we launched service to India late last year. If there's just a bunch of people sitting in Atlanta, Georgia, who have never been to India, aren't of Indian descent, don't know Indian cuisine, don't know cultural mores or norms, and then multiply that times 60 countries, which is the number that we serve. If you don't have those people, those experiences, that cultural orientation and knowledge in your organization, how likely are we ever to serve those people the way we would hope to serve them, such that they would choose us over a competitive offering? So I say in our group all the time, none of us is as smart as all of us, because no one person can be an airline, right? Somebody's got to fly the plane that's different than somebody who's a flight attendant, which is someone who's different from taking the reservation. But equally, when you, just not the roles they play, but the experiences they bring in all of the different forms of diversity, night shifts, early shifts, geographic orientation. You can't, as I said earlier, we just couldn't ever hope to connect the world if we don't really first reflect the world, and it's still a journey we're very much on. We need to continue to grow in that space and to gather more in the way of the unique experiences that everyone from different walks of life brings to us.
Jonathan, you are expanding around the world. How do you navigate, the zoning laws of San Francisco and Banana, which we learned about earlier, all the way to some of the other countries you're doing, and the cultural differences? Is it by getting the right people on the bus to chart these courses?
Absolutely. I've built on what we heard from Christian and Tim in that one of the strengths, though there's a complexity to it, of Habitat, is that all over the world we're a local organization. So that I loved when I met a wonderful young staffer in Indonesia, and she got wide-eyed and said, "You mean there's Habitat in other countries too?" Because it was really started as a grassroots movement. And so for us, I think we're still on that same journey. Internationally, we're very diverse. Our Atlanta mix doesn't look as global as our global team. I think our Manila office has 21 Asian nationalities represented in it. And likewise, if you were in Costa Rica, South Africa, Bratislava, you would see the whole diversity of our world serving there. I think the principal piece becomes, and it's an important reason why we need not just public-private partnerships, but what we would say the 4 Ps, public-private-people partnerships. And the role of nonprofits and civil society in many ways is to make sure that the voice of the community is represented. And so I think the core principle for us is that whenever we think about community development, neighborhood revitalization, or community change, that has to start with the community. And so how do you bring, and it's not always the formal leadership in the community, who are the voices in the community that really represent and are those influencers in the community, and how do we make sure that the vision for that community starts there and that we're coming alongside? And so, at its best, Habitat for Humanity has always been based on that idea of partnership. We talk about it, it's not a handout, it's a hand up. We build with, not for families. And that's why I think at the principles that the family is a full participant in the process, and through that sweat equity and through the partnering and the fact that they're paying back an affordable mortgage that revolves in the community, they're then not just a recipient of that hand up, they're actually helping that next family have their chance as well. And that sense of partnership is so important. The other side I would say is we have seen, and the data is now really clear, that even in cities that have historically been viewed as reasonably affordable, that doesn't mean they're necessarily equitable. And ironically, my hometown, Atlanta, and Charlotte, North Carolina, were 49 and 50 of the top 50 markets in the US for social mobility. So even though it was technically affordable, we've created concentrated poverty where it takes a minor miracle for somebody and as many people have said, your zip code shouldn't determine your destiny. And what I've experienced is it's pretty rare when I speak to a group like this, or particularly I was up on the Hill last week, it's pretty rare to meet a political leader or a corporate leader who grew up in really substandard housing in a rough part of the city where he or she came from. And in a way that's self-fulfilling, because it takes almost a minor miracle for someone growing up in concentrated poverty to break out and get to the C-suite of a major company or get into a position of political power. And so I think one of the things we have to grapple with is not just the overall averages, but do we actually have pathways for everybody in our cities to be full participants?
We have a couple minutes left. Jonathan, as a recently published author, you get a moment to tell us something from your book. You said there was a particular anecdote that you had. It was the empowerment chapter and where the numbers and the personalities came together.
Well, if you'll indulge me, I think the danger of talking about data is it just stays up here in the cloud. And I care a lot about data. You know, you need the data, but ultimately hearts are changed by story. And if I can share one story, and the reason I wrote this book has no data in it. It's really all about individuals around the world transforming themselves and their communities. And my hope is when people read it, they will think, oh, I have to go do something in my community. And that's really the goal. And I want to share, because those numbers are so big. We've helped 29 million people have better housing around the world. But it's important that every one of those represents a story and a family and someone who's trying to make a difference. And I want to just share quickly the story of my friend Boris. Boris grew up in Charlotte, unfortunately the place with the least social mobility of any major city in the United States. And Boris grew up in really rough circumstances. So he lived in a neighborhood called The Hole. You can imagine how great that was. And there were shootings, there were... Wow. It was really bad.
Yeah, okay.
Ow.
We rely too much on special effects.
It was, we'll pretend we planned that. So you can think how bad that was for us. It was worse for Boris. And Boris was in first grade, and he was struggling. He was flunking, he was acting out, he was not doing well, and he was one of those children who could have been written off. And when he was in third grade, he told me everything changed for him because his mom qualified to buy a Habitat for Humanity house in Charlotte. And they moved to Optimist Park. And I love the imagery of that. So moving from The Hole to Optimist Park. And it turned out Boris was actually a really smart kid, did not have there was no indoor plumbing, there was no good place to study, there were no role models around him. And suddenly he turned into a good student, found some good mentors, was a good athlete, earned a full scholarship to Davidson College, ended up getting an MBA, worked in banking and then affordable housing, and now he's working in senior care in Charlotte. Ended up being chair of the Habitat for Humanity Charlotte board and is now on Habitat's global board of directors. And Boris is one of those people that makes the world better. And we celebrate that. But I share it because just think about all the Borises who are out there who just need that chance to grow into all that God intended for them. And in some ways, that becomes the heart of our mission. And so whether it's housing or all the other key needs in a community, and we know housing isn't the only need, how do we create truly sustainable communities such that every child at least has the chance to grow into the person they were called to be? So thank you for the engagement and for the many of you who already support ours or other very worthy missions. But but step by step, we have a lot of work to do together.
Well, thank you, Christian, Jonathan, Tim. Thanks a lot. This was great. Our time one of our core values is running on time, and it says we're on to the next panel.
Great. Thank you, guys.